So we were in the brief story or the telling of the confrontation between Israel and Edom. And this is starting at verse 14. Last time we talked, we compared and contrasted to Yaakov's confrontation with Esau, and saw some language parallels between the two of them. They certainly seem to be parallel narratives. And as Lois briefly suggested last time, might help to understand the later treatment of Edom as an enemy of the people, and whereas in the Yaakov and Esau one, you definitely see that Esau was angry at him. It looks from the text like he had cause to be angry at him. Yaakov's making up with him, and it looked like they made up. But this suggests an icier kind of relationship, and there's no explanation given for why they feel icy towards the Jewish people. There's no context really in this this telling for why they wouldn't allow the Jewish people to pass through their land, especially as the nation, through Moshe, is offering compensation for anything that the people would use. So there's no explanation given. They just stand there and they say no. So we're left to speculate as to why that might be. And obviously we have the help of the commentaries and the Medrash and all sorts of what we typically rely on to give us some color to the text as it's presenting itself. And they allow for a kind of rereading of the story between Yaakov and Esau, especially at that moment when Esau kisses Yaakov and cries on his neck, that might have just been temporary, even for Esau, that Esau himself was not fully reconciled with Yaakov, that he continued, Esau himself hated Yaakov, and it was something that was a kind of family legacy to hate Yaakov and then to hate the Jewish people.
It's interesting at the beginning of it. Moses sends emissaries, it says. He doesn't go himself, and he says, "So said your brother Israel," reminding them of who.
Yeah.
I mean, even
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When these kind of meetings happen, we typically hear that God told Moshe to do something, especially something like this. But we don't get that here in this story. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. That this wasn't carefully choreographed by God. It could be that it was, but it doesn't tell us that. And especially the decision not to attack Edom is that, I mean, you would think that would have to be something that was run by God. But just with the way everything else plays out, in these stories, they are so carefully directed by God. All the interactions with these nations and the battles with them, whether to go to battle or not go to battle, you would think that that would have to be something that was very much. So if you assume that all of this was carefully choreographed by God, then that allows for a certain interpretation of, in other words, this, you could ask yourself, if this is entirely choreographed by God, what I mean is Moshe's reaching out and the way he reaches out, the language he's using, and then the decision not to attack, not Edom's response. I'm not suggesting Edom's response is choreographed by God. I'm saying Moshe's. So you could ask yourself then, why are we being told this story? So again, it could be that it's being told so that we could use it to look back at the Esav story as for a little bit more color in the Yaakov and Esav story, or to form some kind of a middle step, so that when we finally see the prophecy of Ovadia, or when we see the prophecies like of Amos and others who talk about the fall of Edom, so we get some understanding. Because again, if you're just looking at the text in the Yaakov and Esav story, it looks like it was resolved. Yeah. And then suddenly you're seeing this this treatment of Edom by the prophets, and it's sort of surprising. So it could be it's there for that reason. But again, it doesn't. It's also a choice by the Torah not to give us details about why they are saying no.
And related, is there any commentary about why Moshe says, the other words are right out of the Haggadah, or obviously Haggadah is right out of here, but then he says that God sent an emissary and took us out of Egypt, when we are told, no, not an angel, not a seraph, but he,
right.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Is he referring to himself?
Yeah. Yeah, he must be. 16.
Yeah, so I mean, Rashi says that's himself, but
right. It says an emissary. God's emissary was Moses.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's where they jump to, because like you're saying, he specifically, even later, he tells Moshe after the golden calf, I'm going to put an angel there in between the people and me, and the people beg him not to, and then he agrees. When God says, Ani velo malach, ani velo saraf, he seems to be talking about the death of the firstborn over there, but which also is problematic, because it does refer to a mashchis, a destroyer, at one point. So the question is, how is there a mashchis if he's saying I did it on my own? But certainly that is an important theme of going out of Egypt, that it's God himself taking us out of Egypt. So that might be why they, why the commentaries jump on that he's talking about himself. also it's interesting if you're paralleling these stories, the Yaakov and Esav one, with this story, then the parallel to us being in Egypt is Yaakov being with Lavan in the house of Lavan, and there too, God intercedes in order to protect Yaakov from Lavan. In fact, the Haggadah's chosen way to interpret Arami Oved Avi, one way to translate that is my father was a wandering Aramean, but that's not the way the Haggadah translates it. The Haggadah translates it as an Aramean tried to kill my father. Bikesh Lavan, Lakaras Akol. Lavan wanted to uproot everything, and so God had to intervene. So that's also an interesting parallel to Yaakov's time in the Lavan and the Jewish people's time in Egypt. Nachmanides, the Ramban, discusses what is a important traditional principle, which is Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, Ma'aseh Avot Siman Labanim, which means that literally it means what happened with the fathers is a sign for the children. But the way he understands it is that whatever happened to the patriarchs is going to happen to us. And therefore, if you want to learn about what's going on in our lives, look back at what happened to the patriarchs, how they responded to it, what was the cause of it, what were the results of it, what were the interpretations of it. In other words, you can learn about our present situation by reflecting back on the patriarchs, because the patriarchs experience in a microcosm what we experience as a nation in history. So that's why they had to go into exile, because we went into exile. So Avram goes to Egypt like we went to Egypt. Sarah's afflicted, Avram's afflicted. When they take Sarah away, the Egyptian household is struck with something like plagues, and then Avram and Sarah and Lot are sent away with great gifts, just like the Jewish people leave Egypt with great wealth. So Avram, in a microcosm, goes through the experience that the Jewish people have in Egypt, but each one. So Yaakov also, in some sense, he goes into exile because, again, the Jewish people are born of him. In some ways, he is the genetic material out of which the Jewish people come, and therefore he too lives this kind of life. He goes into exile. He suffers while he's in exile. He comes out with great wealth, like the Jewish people do, and also had to be saved by God. But this, once you've been drawn to compare the texts, you are drawn to compare the Egypt experience with the Yaakov's experience with Lavan. And so that actually gives a little more body to the Ramban's notion.
I wonder if Moshe retells this story. First he says, remember, we're your brother, and then he talks about how much we suffered. So yeah, even though something bad happened then, we suffered a great evil also.
Right, which when Yaakov's telling it, it looks like he's reassuring Esav.
Right.
You think I was given just an easy life and
right.
an abundance. Right. I wasn't. So this, if you're learning them in parallel, would mean the same, would have the same kind of purpose, that
Yeah.
if you're holding some kind of continued grudge over what happened, just see what happened. But it's a two-sided statement, just like the Midrash understands it with Lavan. When Yaakov is telling Esav that he lived with Lavan, there's two sides to it. He's telling him, I lived with him, I suffered there, but I remained true, and I survived Lavan. You know, somebody who could survive Lavan is formidable. You know, and it could be that there's this side of it too. We suffered, so we want you to know our life hasn't been smooth. You could take comfort in that. But there's another side to it, which is that God took us out, he protected us, and, you know, we've got God.
Yeah, we've got God on our side. Right.
Right. So,
Where have I heard that?
right. So,
I hope we do now. Yeah.
yes, I agree. Okay. So that was that, and I'm sure there's a lot more to mine there, but we'll leave that. And did I mention that it has one of my favorite, I think I talked about it on Tuesday night. I don't know if I talked about it in our group, that in verse 17, it has one of my favorite Aryeh Kaplan translations. In verse 17, it says, that will go along the Derech HaMelech. Oh no, this isn't it. This isn't it. The King's Way. Yeah. No, this isn't it. The one I was thinking about was Sunset Highway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the one where he translates Derech Mavo HaShemesh as the Sunset Highway. Ah, that was delicious. All right, but that's not this. This is the Way of the King. I think people have talked about these. These are like well-worn paths that people would take when you were, let's say you're part of a caravan that's traveling the north and south. So there's from Africa, let's say you're coming from Africa and you want to go to Turkey, let's say. So, or even Africa, and then you want to go to the Far East. So you'd come up there. There's like these there's these traveling places, because you have to travel. First of all, you're not traveling up and down mountains. You don't want to be traveling, and
they're not super highways.
Right, but they are well designed in the sense that they make the most sense if you're walking across. Just like there's a highway that from Roman times, but the Romans, it's from way earlier than the Romans, but the Romans actually made a road there, which is in the Galilee. There's this area that is relatively flat where you can cross the country east to west. If you try to cross the country east to west, almost anywhere else, you have to go over mountains in order to do that, because in Israel, there's like this mountain range that is the spine of the country, from Beersheba all the way up past, Tzfat. There's a spine of mountains going across there, and it's not, it's treacherous to have to, so there are these plains at certain points of Israel, and especially that area between Israel and Jordan. You have two mountain ranges. You can look from one mountain range to the next mountain range, and then you have this flat territory. And so clearly, if you're a caravan that's traveling, you're going to want to go along the flat territory. But part of the problem with the flat territory is you have to have access to water. You have to have access to different things, and so there would be all sorts of topographical and other uckles that would go into your consideration. So once there was a good place, they're probably for thousands of years going to be using that route in order to get there. So these things like the King's Way, I'm assuming that it is, still a known. I'm just going to look it up for the heck of it. Why? Because I can. Because I live in a time where there's a magic genie. I just have to ask it a question. And it sometimes gives me the proper answer. I was thinking this morning while I was putting in search terms that this is not unlike the oracle, the Urim Vitumim. When people will say you can only ask one question at a time, you have to be careful how you phrase the question or you might get a funny answer. We're reading about it as if we have no experience with something like this, and it's all some kind of mysterious mumbo jumbo when we experience this all the time when we're looking for things. How careful you have to be to find the right search words. King's Highway Bible.
Are you doing ChatGPT?
I am doing Perplexity. I'm using, which is, I think it's connected. I don't know. Okay. So far what it says is the following. The King's Highway is mentioned in the Bible's Old Testament as a road that the Israelites used during their Exodus journey. The King's Highway is referred to in the following Bible passages. Numbers 20:17. The Israelites request permission to pass through the king of Edom's territory, promising to stay on the highway. Numbers 2:12. The King's Highway is mentioned in this passage. Deuteronomy 2:27. The King's Highway is mentioned in this passage. The King's Highway was a significant caravan route that connected Syria and the Gulf of Aqaba, running east of the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea. It was a vital route for international trade. It passed through Ammon, Moab, Edom, Gilad, and Bashan, and it also connected to roads in the Negev that led to Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests that the King's Highway has been in use since at least the 8th century before the Common Era. It was used by the Edomites, the Nabateans, the Romans, the Byzantines, and Muslims. The Roman Emperor Trajan renovated the road to improve communication and transportation between Basra and El Aqaba. That's pretty good. But it's where is it saying? It actually has a map here. I'm just going to click on this map because
So Lawrence of Arabia would probably
would have gone on it. He would
Yeah.
have used the King's Highway. So it connected Syria and the Gulf of Aqaba. It's on the east of the Jordan Valley and east of the Dead Sea. It was a vital road. I think I drove along it because I once drove, my mother came and wanted to go to Petra. So we went, my son and nephew were in yeshiva at the time. AY and my nephew Yossi were in yeshiva at the time. So the way we decided to do it was we crossed into Jordan by that crossing whose name I'll remember. You drive across this bridge and then you get to Jordan and then you drive down
Allenby?
Yeah, the Allenby Bridge. And then you drive south along this road, which parallels the road that you would take to Eilat, like on the other side. So also the same road you take, like if you're going to Masada or you're going to Engedi, etc. So they have like a parallel. I'm assuming that's where we're talking about, because it was on the east side of the Dead Sea, going straight down. I bet it was the King's Highway. How do you like that? I might have driven on it. Okay. So that is that.
That's interesting, because also Bashan is one of the places mentioned, but at least in the Haggadah, I know, the song.
Right. Well, it's coming up. Because Og was the king of Bashan. Okay, so now we are in chapter 20, verse 22. We are going to read 22 through 29. 20 through to 29.
I'll read.
Okay.
Sorry, Rabbi, I can't remember. Are we in
in Numbers, in Bamidbar?
Bamidbar, okay.
In Bamidbar.
What did you say?
Chapter 20. Chapter 20, verse 22.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. They journeyed from Kadesh, and the children of Israel arrived, the entire assembly, at Mount Hor. Hashem said to Moses and Aaron at Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land that I have given to the children of Israel, because you defied my word at the waters of strife. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his vestments, and dress Eleazar his son in them. Aaron shall be gathered in and die there. Moses did as Hashem commanded, and they ascended Mount Hor before the eyes of the entire assembly. Moses stripped Aaron's garments from him and dressed Eleazar his son in them. Then Aaron died there on the top of the mountain, and Moses and Eleazar descended from the mountain. When the entire assembly saw that Aaron had perished, they wept for Aaron 30 days, the entire house of Israel.
Okay. All right. So we heard about Miriam passing away. And now we hear about Aaron passing away. And the way it is, first of all, the place, there are people who believe they know where this is, that it's in Jordan somewhere. And I've even seen pictures of people that have gone to visit it. They had to dress up looking like Arabs. And these were like Hasidic guys who dressed up with a kafia and a robe, looking like an Arabs, to go visit it, because it would be dangerous to just be walking around like that as Jews. By the way, even when we went to Petra, we had no warnings from anybody when we went to Petra that there could be any danger.
Right.
People go all the time. But when we came back, we went back through a lot instead of going back up, because the Allenby Bridge was closed and we had to go back through a lot. So when we went back through the border at a lot, we were rebuked by the border guards for wearing our yarmulkes. Why were you? They said that, like, why would you wear your yarmulkes over there? Don't you know it's dangerous? We had no clue that anybody would consider it dangerous. So these guys are not even in Petra; they're like off in.
We have pictures of David's uncle and cousin or something dressed as Arabs when they were in Hebron, when they were studying. I don't know if they always did that, but we have a picture of them. There, yeah.
Oh, that's that topic that we've talked about. Why do we dress like Europeans in the Middle East? Or Mountain Bible. Let's see what happens here. Am I still in perplexity? Yeah. All right, so let's. let's see here. Based on the writings of Josephus, it was customarily been identified with the Jebel Nebi Harun, which means mountain of the prophet Aaron. So Jebel is a mountain, Nebi is a prophet, like Nabi, and Harun is how they say Aaron, Aharon. Aharon is called Harun. Or simply Jebel Harun, a twin peak mountain 4,780 feet above sea level in the Edomite Mountains on the east side of the Arava section of the Jordan Rift Valley. Okay. So they stopped there, and they're on the border. It pointed out, they're on the border of the Edomians. So Aaron is gathered unto his people. That is the characterization of death. When it speaks about death here, it says he will be gathered unto his people. So this is when you're looking for textual clues as to what people thought happened after you die. So these kind of phrases are data. So what does it mean to be gathered unto his people? That might help in sifting, when you're sifting through the various data about what is death. So anyways, and he's not going to come into the land because you rebelled against my words with regard to the water of strife. So Moshe is told to take Aaron and Elazar his son, bring them up onto the mountain. Now, what does that sound like to you? The Hebrew is Kach es Aaron ves Elazar beno v'ha'al otam hor hahar. I ask you, is there another phrase in the Torah that just evokes?
Abraham?
It does to me. In what situation?
Akeda. I don't
Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
that kind of language. I mean, isn't this strange? Aaron is going to die. Why is he being taken? Aaron should die. If God wants Aaron to die on top of the mountain,
Maybe
he talked to
him.
Aaron all the time.
Maybe he pushed him off.
No, I'm saying why doesn't God, why does he have to be taken? Kach, take him. Take him, it says. Here's the language from Akedas Yitzchak.
Yes, take him.
So, language from the binding of Isaac. It was after these things, and God tested Abraham. Vayomer elav Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, Vayomer hineni, and he said, here I am. Vayomer kach na es bincha, take, kach, please take your son. V'ha'alehu sham le'olah. So please take your son, your only son, who you love, Yitzchak, and lech lecha el eretz HaMoriah, and go to the land of Moriah. Va'aleu sham le'olah al achad heharim asher omar elecha, and raise him up for an elevation offering on one of the mountains which I will tell you about. So, that's such a pregnant sentence. There's so much going on there. It has lech lecha in it, He doesn't tell him where he's taking him, just like in Lech Lecha. It's got all that going on. But he says the words kach and bring him up as an elevation offering. And then here he says, kach es Aaron es Elizabeth v'ha'al otam hor ha'ar. So it has the kach word, it has the v'ha'al, raise them, in this case, raise them, word, and it has mountain.
Sound familiar?
And then when he finally does get him up there, what does it say? All right, we were gonna now start to pay more attention, see if there's anything. But all right, so Aaron took off. He undressed Aaron, and he took off the Kohen clothing from Aaron, and he dressed Eleazar with it. And Aaron was gathered and died there. Moshe did as he was commanded by God. They went up, so he's told to do it. They went up to Hor Har in front of all the people. Moshe undressed him, dressed Eleazar. Aaron died at the top or at the head of Hor Har. And then Moshe and Aaron come down from the mountain. And all the people see it that Aaron had died, and they cry about Aaron 30 days, all the people of Israel. So now we have Moshe did what he was told. They went up to the mountain in front of all the people. So in the Akedah story, what happened? So they saw the place from afar, and Avram said to his youth, "You stay here with the donkey. I and the boy are going to go there and bow down, and we're going to come back." So there are people there, but it doesn't say anything about them watching them go up. It does say they both went together. Then you have that surprising thing when they come down, it just says Abraham returned. It doesn't say they came down together. But that would be an interesting parallel, because in both cases, if you're reading the text closely, you're missing somebody. In this text, they're missing Aaron, and that's why they realize Aaron has died. They all saw that Aaron had died. Because what happened was, Moshe and Eleazar came down from the mountain, and the people saw that Aaron had died. Now, when it says the people saw that Aaron had died, were they able to see from the ground that he had died on top of the mountain? Or what it means is only two of them came down. So he must have died. So
They also saw Eleazar in the priestly garments.
right, that's true. Right, so the Midrash says they also saw that the clouds of glory left. But it doesn't seem like the text wants us to think they actually saw that he died.
Right.
That he fell to his death, to be the case.
Moses and Eleazar done them in. No.
No, they.
I'm sorry.
I mean, there was
kidding.
the whole thing about how they went up. There's nothing that says it was a secret.
No, that's true.
Right. That.
How is Pinchas another brother? I mean,
he is a grandson of Aaron.
Oh, the grandson. Okay.
He's the son of Eleazar. Pinchas ben Eleazar ben Aaron are Cohen. Right. So,
Oh, so through that line, the priesthood, the kahuna, all right.
okay, yeah. So that's another term for dying. So we have Aaron being gathered to his people. We have Aaron was gathered, and then we have the word mace, which is the word we most commonly use for dying, memtov. That's in verse 26 at the end. We have gathered and died. Even the taking off of the clothing is interesting, because when clothing come in, it's after they eat from the from the tree, and they recognize that they are naked. Eventually God makes them clothing. So taking off clothing, that is highly symbolic. You have Yosef's clothing being taken off when he's thrown into the pit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have that. Is that what happened? Yosef's clothing, his clothing were taken off. Also, his clothing were taken off, and the body was, he was taken off because it was the coat of many colors,
Right.
and they dip it in the ink, in the blood of the goat, the goat's blood. So there you have his clothing taken off. Here you have his clothing taken off. Yeah, so that's quite a dramatic gesture. But again, he uses the word in 28, Vayamos, he died there. And then they have this word in 29, the word is gava. So in 29, that's 20. Doesn't talk about that word. There is kviya. That word kviya can refer to a corpse also. Anyways, there's some data, a little bit of data over there. He gets mourning for 30 days. Did it say that with Miriam? What did it say about Miriam? It just says she died there and she's buried there. It doesn't talk about mourning. Okay. I know it is contrasted with Moshe. Moshe dies. It also says 30 days. The people cried for Moshe. This is in chapter 34 of Deuteronomy. The people cried for Moshe for 30 days. Here it says, all the house of Israel. Over there, it does not say all the house of Israel. Yeah, it doesn't say all the house of Israel. Do you have a note on that, on yours, about all the house of Israel?
Which line?
It would be 29.
Not really. Well, yeah, it says the entire house of Israel. Aaron was mourned by everyone, men and women alike, because Aaron had pursued peace and extended himself to bring harmony between adversaries and between man and wife. Rashi, in contrast, Moses was not as universally mourned, see Deuteronomy 34:8, because it was his responsibility to judge and sometimes admonish, thus lessening the love that some felt for him.
Right. So you've got what we call the right hand and the left hand. Good cop, bad cop. So and Moshe, as the executive, he is ultimately going to sometimes upset and anger people.
Yeah.
And whereas Aaron could be, it was always trying to bring around peace.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was the peace side, what we would call the chesed side. Although in the order of the spheros, Moshe is on the side of chesed. But I've seen some mystical writings where they say that that even though he's on the right side, it switches. I don't know, there's some mystical thing going on there. There's some mystical things. But anyway, so that was the contrast I was looking for. I was hoping you'd have it. Here by Aaron, it says, Kol Beis Yisrael. By Moshe, it does not. They both were mourned for 30 days, but there's those additional words there. All right, so for those who are looking for key terms that make you want to explore deeper, there is what appears to be a connection to the Akedah in the language, to the binding of Isaac in verse 25.
When it says, because you defied my words at Mariva, is he talking to both of them, to Aaron, to Moses?
It's you plural.
It is.
Yeah, the actual term is maritem.
Oh, tem. Okay.
You plural. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So, and there I'm suggesting you have the parallel language is take him, because why is he talking about take him? Beno, his son, the word beno. So there's take, the word beno, bring up, v'ha'al, bring him up, and mountain. And then I'm suggesting that there's if you like, the mysterious thing about the Akedah, which is how come it only talks about Avraham going down, it doesn't talk about Yitzchak. You have the missing person in this one. You do have two people coming down, but you're missing Aaron, and that's a source of sadness and crying. So Aaron is missing on the way down. Yitzchak is missing on the way down by the Akedah. I'm suggesting that's another thing to see. Anyways, there's the Akedah reference. There's the taking off the clothing reference, which could be, its own study. And then there's the words that refer to what happens after you die. What is this very mysterious phrase, to be gathered unto your people, supposed to mean? And then you have the crying for Aaron for 30 days and all the people of Israel. It is something that is consistent throughout the Torah. which is that when somebody dies, you're supposed to cry. You're supposed to cry when somebody dies.
If you go back to 22, and in here, there's an explanation of 22 through 29. And it says, in relation to Aaron's death, on the 1st of Av, in the 40th year of Israel's wandering in the wilderness,
Yeah.
at the age of 123, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Aaron died and was succeeded by his son.
Yeah.
And he had the satisfaction of seeing him as the Kohen Gadol.
Where is that?
The one page before,
Yes.
lines
Oh.
22 through 29.
Okay.
Yeah, so what was I talking about though?
It
I was
Says
there
he
was something-
died by the death by a kiss of God.
Right. Nisas Nishika is considered the most desired death. But there was something I was talking about right
Sorry.
then. What was it? So we were talking
Crying at death.
Oh yeah, so there's an assumption that when people die, we're supposed to cry. So the question is, why? Why? What are you crying about? I mean, it's a natural,
Yeah,
it's a natural response.
thing.
But let's say I want to understand it. Let's say I want to understand. I even remember, I hate to bring up these heavy things, but they are learning moments. But we had a baby that lived for a day, and then the baby died. And I remember I shared this with Ramosha Shapiro. That I wasn't sure. In my mind, I was told it's inevitable. This baby is going to die. By the way, weirdly, this could be a Russian novel because one of my closest friends, my chavrusa for many years, he continues to be one of my closest friends, was the head of the NICU at that time.
Wow.
He was there with me while this whole thing was going on. And he was, telling me what the situation is. At one point he said, pick her up because you hold her now while she's still alive.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it was that kind of, so I knew she was going to die. And I wondered, what will be my reaction? Will I cry? Because where would it come from? At the moment, I'm so involved in the thing. And then when she died, I cried. So I asked her, Moshe Shapiro, what is that? Like, what is that? What happened? And so he said that the word to cry is related to the word to cry is bocha. That's related to the word navoch. Navoch means, so it says the Jewish people were navuchim. The Jewish people were like lost in the desert and weren't sure how to proceed. So he said that that's crying comes out of that. There's some kind of sense of being lost and not knowing how to proceed. And so, but there's an assumption that when somebody dies, there's going to be crying. And you could ask yourself, if I'm a spiritual person and I understand that they don't disappear, they're just moving to a different situation. So why am I crying? Until my kids left, to go to school. And then I experienced the profound sadness of the fact that they were just plain leaving, for
Just
a few months.
Yeah.
And
don't worry, they came home to do the laundry.
and I know they will. And even though they did it several times, so now I'm trained to know that when they go, they're going to come back. It's still, like devastating.
Yep.
And I had a source for this idea. For a long time, I had this notion that even in the time of Mashiach, I know what the source is. Even in the time of Mashiach, this pain is going to be there. The pain of our our children leaving. You know, that pain is still going to be there. And I always said that, but I just said it because why shouldn't it be? It's going to be there. But then I found this, I realized I already knew the source. The source is Shmini Atzeres. The Midrash says that Sukkot is like a party thrown by a king for all his subjects. And then after the week, all the subjects go home, but he turns to the Jewish people and he says, I want one more day with you. And his words are, Kosha alai predaskan. It is hard for me to separate from you. So you have even God feels the pain of the separation. So even if it's not that the person's not going on to something better or anything about the condition for that person, the person's not disappearing. They're just separating. They're just moving on, and that's a source of tremendous. That's crying. There's crying there. Okay.
But what about the crying? There's so much joy sometimes. You cry from joy. You cry at weddings. You cry when you're sentimental.
Right, that's a different kind of crying. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. That's important to thank you for keeping that there, because that needs to be explained.
That's the happiness cry.
Right. That one.
There is.
Explained.
I mean, there really is.
Right. Yeah. But what we could, there's something that deserves going deeper there. Okay. All right. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to learn together today. I look forward to doing that next week.